That day, Eriri asked Utaha about the script she wrote, wondering why she changed the number of girls in the pool from 2 to 5. Utaha explained that after visiting the location, she got a lot of new ideas. Eriri scolded Utaha for making such a drastic change on a whim because it meant additional illustrations as a consequence. Utaha then pointed out that Eriri hadn't even drawn anything yet and that she was aware Eriri's drawing schedule was slightly behind. Eriri blamed it on Utaha's messy concept. Utaha argued that her concept was clearly written down and even included a detailed description of the swimsuit worn by Kareri, the blonde-haired protagonist. However, Eriri protested that describing her as scrawny, flat-chested, and wearing padded swimwear was just wrong. Utaha merely described what she had in mind, but Eriri insisted that the body shape should have been decided when they discussed the character design. Eriri was also confused about why Hibaragoka's waist suddenly became slimmer when it was originally supposed to be wide as per Eriri's design. Utaha simply said she didn't recall ever approving such a design. Eriri argued that design rights belonged to the illustrator, and she wouldn't let an ordinary writer interfere with her work. Meanwhile, Megumi and Tomoya just watched Eriri and Utaha bickering. Megumi commented that since Utaha's script was already being worked on and Eriri's illustrations weren't too late, they were still on schedule. Megumi wondered why Utaha and Eriri always fought whenever they met. Tomoya explained that the two of them had known each other before he recruited them, and had been arguing since the beginning. Megumi then practiced dialogue with Tomoya, but when Megumi read the protagonist's line calling him deaf and dumb, Tomoya got annoyed. A year ago in the library, Utaha saw that her light novel was available on the shelf and immediately knew it was because of Tomoya. As she walked down the school hallway alone, Eriri suddenly called out to her. Surprisingly, Utaha recognized Eriri's name. Eriri felt honored that Utaha knew who she was and referred to her as the long-haired Ice Queen. Utaha admitted that she didn't like being called such a weird nickname. Eriri then advised Utaha not to associate with a junior who was also a nerd, referring to the time she saw Utaha talking with Tomoya on the school rooftop. Utaha dismissed it, saying Eriri must have mistaken her for someone else, but Eriri insisted that they were talking about the book Metronome of Love and was sure she wasn't mistaken. Utaha asked what was so wrong about her hanging out with Tomoya. Eriri said that both Utaha and Tomoya were nerds, and she found it unfortunate that Utaha, the Queen of Light novels, was associating with an idiotic nerd like Tomoya, who could potentially ruin her reputation. Utaha didn't mind being insulted herself, but she refused to let Eriri use her as an excuse to insult Tomoya. This made Eriri angry, and she asked if Utaha liked Tomoya. Utaha didn't care and chose not to answer, walking away instead. Eriri then shouted that Tomoya didn't like Utaha in that way. He only saw her as a friend he could talk to about books. Eriri also mentioned that Tomoya only cared about Metronome of Love, its characters, and its author. That's when Utaha suddenly approached and cornered Eriri. She introduced herself as a second-year student from Class 2D and revealed that her pen name was Yutaka Kasumi. Eriri was completely shocked to learn that Utaha was the author of Metronome of Love. She never saw it coming. That night at home, she was frustrated that the author of Metronome of Love had to be someone at her school. Eriri was so upset that she even forgot to ask for Utaha's autograph earlier that day. Originally, Tomoya had told Eriri about the book by leaving a copy of Metronome of Love in her locker and telling her that it was the best book he had ever read. Eriri read it and found the story incredibly touching. At school, she planned to meet Tomoya on the rooftop, but she was shocked to find him already deep in conversation with Utaha about the book. After what had happened earlier that day, there was no way Eriri would have the courage to ask Utaha, the author of Metronome of Love, for an autograph. That day, Tomoya was at a cafe with Utaha when she suddenly asked him about Eriri. The question caught Tomoya off guard, making him choke on his drink. He quickly asked why Utaha was bringing up Eriri, to which she casually replied that it was nothing. She had just heard that Eriri was a well-known first-year student at school and was curious if Tomoya knew her. Tomoya responded that he didn't really know Eriri that well. They were in different classes, had different hobbies, and even came from different hometowns. Utaha seemed intrigued and mentioned that she had heard Eriri was half British. Tomoya then explained that Spencer was her father's surname, while Sawamura was her mother's. Her father worked at the British Embassy and met her mother while stationed in Japan. Utaha asked what kind of person Eriri really was since she had never heard any bad rumors about her. She also noted that despite coming from an upper-class background, Eriri seemed to get along with everyone. Tomoya, however, dismissed this, saying that Eriri was just putting on an act, Deep down, she was selfish, stubborn, and quite annoying. Hearing Tomoya talk so much about Eryuri, Utaha raised an eyebrow and asked if he actually spoke with her often. Tomoya denied it, saying that Eryuri barely talked to him at school. She had even forbidden him from speaking to her in public, and if there was ever something important, she would just send him a message on his phone. Tomoya sighed, wondering how long she planned to keep acting that way toward him. Suddenly, Utaha started shaking her leg, making the entire table tremble. Tomoya glanced at her and asked if something he said had upset her. Utaha calmly stated that she wasn't angry, but Tomoya called her out, saying that was a lie. In response, Utaha smirked and said that Tomoya was lying to her as well. The next day, Utaha went to the art club room looking for Eryuri. However, one of Eryuri's friends blocked the entrance, preventing her from going inside. The friend even mentioned that the room had practically become Eryuri's private studio, and even as an official club member, she wasn't allowed to enter. Utaha scoffed and asked if Eryuri was getting special treatment just because she was the blonde-haired rich girl. The friend quickly denied it, saying that Eryuri wasn't treated like that at all. She spoke with her fellow first-year students, just like everyone else. Utaha shrugged and said that made sense considering they were all in the same grade, but then pointed out that first-year students should still show more respect to second years like herself. Ignoring the warnings, Utaha forcefully opened the art club room. The friend panicked and tried to stop her, saying that Eryuri wasn't there at the moment, but Utaha didn't care. She locked the door behind her when she was inside. The friend anxiously called out, worried more about getting in trouble with the teachers than about Eryuri. Inside the room, Utaha glanced around and found sheets of paper with Eryuri's illustrations, along with her artist name printed on them. The following morning, Eryuri arrived at school as usual. Many of her friends greeted her, and she responded with her usual friendly demeanor. However, she suddenly heard someone calling her name. She turned to respond and was shocked to see that it was Utaha. Her reaction made her friends stop in their tracks, staring in confusion at the scene. Trying to keep her composure, Eryuri greeted Utaha back. Her friends were puzzled, wondering why Utaha was speaking to Eryuri. Ignoring them, Utaha asked Eryuri if they could have a private chat. She then led Eryuri to the rooftop. Once there, Eryuri frowned and asked why Utaha had gone out of her way to bring her to such a secluded place. Utaha smirked and said that she had visited Eryuri's private studio the day before. Then, without hesitation, she revealed what she had discovered: Eri Kashiwaji, a member of the adult Doujin circle Egoistic Lily. Utaha held up her phone displaying Eryuri's artwork. She casually remarked that Eryuri was a well-known illustrator with a strong following at every event, particularly among male fans aged 17 and up. Eryuri felt embarrassed and asked how Utaha could know about it. Utaha had found the name tag on the picture from the internet the day before. Eryuri then asked what Utaha wanted from her. Eryuri suspected that Utaha might be trying to blackmail her, threatening to keep her identity a secret or perhaps snap her fingers and call her male followers to attack her. It would be impossible for her to fight back, and those male followers would probably grin at her. Utaha asked Eryuri not to compare this situation with the adult comics. Eryuri then wondered if Utaha was going to smirk at her and call her a naive girl. But Utaha actually said that Eryuri could just draw it herself and even called her a creator of cheap adult comics. Eryuri asked why Utaha was searching for her identity. Utaha paused for a moment and asked why Eryuri was hiding her identity. Eryuri replied, saying that wasn't Utaha herself also hiding her identity as a light novel writer. Utaha explained that she never meant to hide it, it's just that no fool would dare talk to her, except for Tomoya. Utaha then asked when Eryuri started drawing. It turned out that Eryuri had been drawing since second grade in grade school and had kept it hidden all this time. Eryuri was tired of being called a maniac, and it was so embarrassing. Utaha pointed out that such thoughts didn't hold any value anymore in their time. Eryuri asked Utaha not to act like she understood what it was like to be teased and laughed at every day. Even the teachers didn't understand. In fact, even her one and only friend had distanced herself from her. Eryuri just wanted to talk about the games and cartoons she loved with a friend. Utaha then gave Eryuri a handkerchief to wipe her tears. Utaha realized that what motivated Eryuri was her unpleasant childhood experience. Utaha said that Eryuri didn't draw to make others happy, but rather, more to seek revenge. Eryuri responded by saying that Utaha didn't write to entertain others because she never truly entertained anyone and basically just looked down on them. Eryuri mentioned that the readers of Utaha's light novels weren't touched out of empathy, but because they had been calculated. She said Utaha only played with people's emotions with her technique. If Utaha thought Iriri's motivation was revenge, that might be true, but Iriri thought that Utaha had no motivation at all, and that was far worse. Iriri was even surprised she had been fooled into liking a writer with no emotions. Utaha then asked if that was Iriri's opinion about Metronome of Love. Utaha said that even if their works were made out of revenge or calculation, if they still managed to touch someone, it meant that they had lost. Iriri got upset and said that Utaha was belittling her readers, but Utaha didn't mean it that way. It turned out that Utaha truly admired the work Iriri created in the art room. Utaha then thanked Iriri for saying that she had played with her readers' emotions using her technique, which in other words was the highest compliment for a writer. Iriri asked if Utaha also played with techniques to flirt with men. Utaha responded by saying that was an accusation from someone who used erotic works to attract men, and it wouldn't affect her at all. Iriri then asked what kind of relationship Utaha had with Tomoya. Utaha asked back what Iriri's relationship with Tomoya was. Iriri said she was Tomoya's childhood friend, but Utaha responded that relationships are defined by time. Not wanting to lose, Iriri then said that love at first sight is easily forgotten. Utaha replied that childhood friends were the typical loser characters in cartoons or games. Iriri said that older female protagonists only appeared in a handful of games. Utaha said that characters with blonde hair from foreign lands were just supporting protagonists. They continued to argue back and forth, neither willing to give in. That was the start of their acquaintance a year ago. That afternoon during a meeting, Tomoya said that they should first focus on the things they had agreed upon and then think about the next steps slowly. Iriri agreed and Utaha said she would think it through at her own pace. Tomoya wrapped up the meeting for the day, but before leaving, he asked Utaha and Iriri to sign a card. Tomoya thought it was a good idea to mark the launch of the game at the Winter Art Festival, as well as to use it as a promotional tool and a symbol of their circle's success. He requested an illustration from Iriri to be placed in the center of the card, with Iriri's signature on the right and Utaha's signature on the left. Tomoya also asked that the character featured in the illustration be Meguri. Iriri asked why she had to draw the illustration. Tomoya explained that it could be used as a promotional item and placed at their booth during the Winter Art Festival. Utaha then asked where the signed cards would be placed before the festival. Tomoya said they would be displayed in a place that they all frequently visited. Utaha guessed that they would probably be placed in Tomoya's own room, and Iriri jokingly asked if this was made for himself. Utaha mentioned that a signed card from Yutaka Kasumi and Eri Kashiwagi could fetch a pretty high price at an online auction. Iriri then replied that it seemed like it was the signature itself that was valuable, and if it were paired with the signature of an unknown writer, it would lose its meaning. Not wanting to back down, Utaha called Iriri an illustrator who hadn't had a professional debut yet. Tomoya explained that those signed cards were treasures to him that he wouldn't sell, as he had wanted them ever since he started the group. To him, the two signatures represented the greatest collaboration. Iriri quickly drew the illustration on the card, and they were all amazed at her skill. Megumi then asked Iriri if she could make one for her as well. It turned out that not only Tomoya wanted the card, but Megumi herself had also longed for Iriri and Utaha's signatures. Iriri didn't mind giving her signature, and Megumi immediately went off to buy the signed cards. Utaha asked Megumi to get an extra card for her, and Iriri also requested one for herself. Megumi quickly left to purchase them.